Hello, Patreon subscribers, and welcome back to another episode of School Sucks, here hosted by Dominic Guarini. A little deviation from what we normally go with, as usually it's kind of the more current members of the AIW Academy, more recent debutees, I believe is how you say it. But today we bring you someone that actually started training before I even arrived at the AIW Academy. What some people would call my greatest rival. In terms of no, don't cut me off. This is my show. What some people would call my greatest rival, aka the guy I yell at more than anybody. Let's welcome to the show this time, Dr. Daniel C. Rockingham.
I think that's very fitting. The guy you yelled the most. Even I wake up the text going like, "What did you do?" I'm like, "I didn't do anything." I'm just yelling at you just because I know.
They're not as frequent as they used to be.
No.
So it's better than that. But let's get down to the brass tacks here, Dan. Heart of the matter is John Thorne. I'm brass tacks. I have something different. But let's get down to the brass tacks. What made you want to be a wrestler?
It's the same basic story as everybody else. I liked it when I was younger. In 2010, I emailed PWO in Cleveland, and I kind of like poked and asked, like, "Hey, what do I do to be a wrestler?" I don't remember what the response was. I remember I got an email. Started dating a girl at the time who hated wrestling, so it kind of deviated my journey for like a pretty long while until I joined the AIW Academy in 2015, and here I am today.
Now, one of the reasons why I ask you that is what people don't know necessarily about you, or what most of our fans don't know, is you come from a family that's very successful in automotive racing and in the automotive field here in the Cleveland area. Your family actually owns one of the bigger auto body garages in the area. So what was it like to go from being around racing every weekend to trying to chase this professional wrestling dream?
It was. I say that professional wrestling is the closest thing to drag racing that you can get without the cars, because it's the same thing. You're driving a far distance for a weekend to like just for a hope and a prayer, and then you got to drive back home. There's no like real guarantee of anything except oh, hey, you're gonna come and do this, just like you're gonna go to a drag race and you're gonna get 2 or 4 qualifying runs, and that's all you're guaranteed. You're not guaranteed money or anything like that. You're just going there to do your thing. And my dad's been driving race cars since 1980. Drag racing, started with a, basic Plymouth, 63 Belvedere, and now we're running a professional circuit with like NHRA, which is like the biggest sanctioning body, and like PDRA and some smaller stuff, and starting to promote our own local races here at Summit Motorsports Park in Norwalk. So,
with all this background, what's your family think of your decision to kind of put racing on the back burner when it's something that you guys have kind of always had, to chase professional wrestling as a passion and what you kind of want to do?
Initially, I don't think my parents knew how to take it, because honestly, I never really told anybody I was training. I kind of just like kept it in my back pocket. It was like when I first started training was because I got hurt playing rugby. And I wanted to just get to like back in shape and like feel good about myself. And then it just kind of spiraled into something that like, oh wow, you actually like, I'm actually like, makes me feel good. And like, I enjoy it, like the actual performing part. And I sent my dad a video of me doing something at training in like July. And that was like at the point where like everyone kind of found out at that point. My dad's like, what the hell is this? And then the cat kind of came out of the bag. And my dad's pretty much, he's bummed that I'm not racing, but he, enjoys that I like doing, the professional wrestling, and he likes coming to the shows, and he loves when Laporta and Alberti, they all heckle me. So my sisters get really mad, and my dad just laughs about it the entire time.
So you started training in what, 2014?
2015.
2015, okay.
In between Gauntlet and the Rap Show.
So you would have been about March of 2015, right?
Yeah.
So, explain your first day of training. You're part of one of the Turner's Hall classes. So explain, your first day of training going in and what it was like, how you're feeling, first day drill, all of that good stuff.
I was never actually at Turner's. I still have never been inside the building.
I thought you were on the first
No.
class. So you were the Detroit Avenue garage.
Yeah, I started in the garage. It's no longer there. It goes, first day I walked in, first person I saw was Biggins, and he was like, sign these forms now. So I did. It was very abrupt, and I was honestly terrified because like everything you hear of like wrestling's really hard and everyone's gonna beat you up, and like I went in expecting exactly what like everything online and like everything you read tells you, and it was kind of like that with like first day drill and like trying to learn a bunch of stuff because I was really the only beginner, and it wasn't like it is now where we have a handful of students in different levels. It was the original class and then me, and that was it.
Now, Worldwide was kind of a newer student while you were there, right?
He was popping in and out in the beginning. He was like there like a couple weeks after.
The story of his life.
Yes. He popped in a couple weeks after I started, and then he was very sporadic in his appearances. And then eventually like he was there full time with Weird Body, like working on that tag team.
So, what were your first impressions of Johnny and Candace, just overall and then as trainers?
Johnny was really soft-spoken, but he knew a lot of stuff. Sometimes you had to work on like prying information out of him, and that was like, and then he would be like, "Oh yeah, I know this trick," and then sometimes the trick would be like, "I gotta go text this guy. Hold on." Just like how do you do a deja vu? Just throw him really really hard. That was the response we got. What's the trick? He goes, and Candace, she was super nice, and he goes, it was a great, like she would teach things that Johnny wouldn't, and it was like a really good balance of like their teaching styles, but then they were also both good cops. Where but then at a point it would just switch, and they would be like, okay, no, that was terrible. Like you gotta change it up, right? Like change this or that, because they weren't.
I would argue that Johnny was always good cop, and then even when he was bad cop, he was still a nice cop. Now Candace never, like if she had to be bad cop, she would be bad cop and tell you something sucked.
Yes, but it was like that was like they were super nice, but then as soon as like something would happen, that's when like they she was definitely more of the like the more emotional side of the two of them.
Well, then I also think bad cops have always kind of been at training for us. Would have been Biggins when he was still with us, and Thorne, they'll bad cop the shit out of you.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Like they're both like nicer, and then like Thorne and Biggins would be like just be super blunt about it, no matter if it was good, bad, in between. They'd be like, no, that's not good enough. Try this, and then go from there.
Yeah, and I think that Biggins and Thorne have always been a big help to kind of get us. I think Thorne and Biggins have always been like a big help in terms of like trying to help the young kids out, because they've seen it all. They've been around independent wrestling for so long. They know what works. They know what doesn't work. So you come in, Johnny and Candace. You've got your training partners. Your Carsons, your Flynn's, Vargo at the time, who most fans don't know. The Weird World, Singh, Daniels at the time. Fresh Meat gets announced as kind of like a concept. What are your thoughts? Because you kind of know this is going to be your AIW debut.
When I think the original, like from what I remember, it was almost around like Absolution-ish time, where like the idea of it came up, or I'm sure may have been on like the back burner for a while, but that was like the first time I remember them talking about a student show or something of that, and I really didn't have a character then or anything. So like when it first got like talked about, I was like, I've been doing this for like less than 3 or 4 months. Like I'm actually going to start like performing in front of these people, and I'm have the least experience out of everyone here, because even at that point, like the Glitch was around, Skylar Faden, and like he had been wrestling apparently for a year or so before and was already a trained wrestler, even though like they started him as a new beginner. And it was I was a little nervous just because I only had the building blocks, didn't have anything to like separate myself, even though I was like thinking in my head I was just gonna be generic indie wrestler A or B.
Oh, speaking of generic wrestler, indie wrestler A or B, let's talk about those first couple sets of gear you got.
Oh, brother.
The AJ Styles tights, as we were passionately referred to them at the AIW Academy.
Hey, those were nice.
Were they?
They were nice quality.
Nice quality, the ones that fell off your ass.
Hey, you know what? You're right. That was you're right. I'm not gonna lie. I ended up I had to go through a couple different iterations of gear.
Those with the Under Armour top.
Yes.
But
Steve, enough with the peanut gallery over there. All right.
But
I couldn't think of a good enough comeback.
We get that. So we get that, and we go from kind of there, and let's talk about the beginning of the good doctor himself, Dr. Daniel C. Rockingham. Where'd the idea come from? You know, kind of where did you come up with the idea? Because let's put it this way, you could have completely thought like, oh, hey, I'm gonna be like Bob Sparkplug Hawley, and I'm gonna be a race guy. But you went completely different. So let's get into it. How was Dr. Daniel C. Rockingham born?
I honestly didn't even think about doing like a racing gimmick at all. I thought to myself I was going to be AJ Styles and RVD somehow mixed, but I didn't have the athleticism nor the speed or prowess to do it. So I don't know. I was just like cutting promos. Like at the time I was living at my grandpa's, living with them, and I was trying to like come up with something that, like, I was just like cutting promos myself, and I cut one like in the mirror like wrestlers do when they're first starting to train, and I was like talking. I said something about like bettering people's lives, something like that. And then at training the one day we did a promo class, and I did a similar promo to that, and everyone's like, that was really good. And then after Wrestling Geek Fest, they're like, we have this idea, and that's how it just kind of came about. It was a brainstorm of people over that weekend, which I didn't attend, and I came in like, all right, here's this idea, and run with it.
Okay, so we have the antithesis. We have the idea. Let's talk about your first match. I was at your first match.
You were
in Colossal Con.
Yeah.
Or the weird makeup Colossal Con they had. And they did that weird Mortal Kombat based show Mega did. And I remember Dr. Dan in the trash bag shorts.
Yeah.
Making his debut. Let's talk about it.
Duke was watching me. I was scared. I was like, oh man, it was the coldest room of all time. The AC was up like to like the hardest it could be in that room. It was freezing. They made us all sit in these chairs and like watch all the matches, and Duke would stand up and be like, all right, now we're gonna have this guy versus this guy, and then you get up from these chairs and you go in the ring, and I ended up wrestling Josh Singh. But I think my favorite part of the entire story of my first match was Duke's like, oh, what's your name? And I told him, and he goes, you're just Dan, go sit.
Didn't you end up being Dan Glover?
No,
I thought you were supposed to be Dangerous Danny Glover.
No, that was Biggins choked about that. And then Duke was gonna like, I think he might have like Biggins told him and he was gonna say it. I'm like, no, and I like told him like Dr. Daniel C. Rockingham. He goes, that's too much.
You didn't look like a doctor that day with the with the pleather shorts on, so it was probably good that you were just Dan that day. You have your first match, and then it's a good thing you brought up Singh. So now we get ready to do the AIW debut. You and Josh Singh as a team taking on Flip Kendrick and Eric Ryan. AIW debut. You're jacked up. The racing crews in the stands.
They were.
Let's go through it.
I was so like nervous and terrified the whole time. Like Eric was like, just relax. Like you're gonna be fine. I'm just like, I was freaking out the whole time in my head, and it went about as well as it could have. I watched it back recently, and I hated literally every second of it. And I'm sure right after it happened, I was like, oh, this was good and this was good. Now I just hate it. But that like looking back at like how that match went and everything, a lot of the stuff that like still works now, like worked then. And that's like why I went back and started watching a lot of my progression, seeing like what worked and what didn't, so I don't make the same mistakes I had before.
So from there, you kind of it's kind of the same kind of like run that all the AIW kids have. They have their debut, and then it's kind of like a holding pattern as to what they're gonna do. You were managing Josh at the time, who was a much more established kind of guy, and we go from there. But while you're doing this, you kind of start to develop the character. Kind of go into the character a little bit and what it was like to develop the Dr. Daniel C. Rockingham character to kind of where you got it to, at least at that point.
At that point, it was like you said, I had gear that didn't match what I was doing because I had it designed and made before I even had a character. The whole idea of like Dr. Dan and what it was, like I had these ideas and like this and that. So I eventually started like, oh, I got the pamphlets, and then I needed something else. So like I already had the suit jackets because that would make sense. And the pamphlets came a little bit after, and then the hoverboard came in like December that year. So I just kept looking online and at different stuff, like taking inspiration from religious preachers and like Simon Dean. Like that's like kind of the idea I had with the Segway. Like I was like, I'll do the hoverboard, like that'll be funny. And then looking at like different stuff, like basically that was my biggest thing, was looking at like a Joel Osteen, and then like wrestling characters that have kind of done like the same or like close to the same gimmick, just trying to get ideas of what I could do, and then it just progressed from there to where I kind of am now.
How do you land on that gimmick?
How do I land on it? It goes, I think it was like I said, I cut the promo at the school, and then you guys at Geek Fest kind of had this idea, and then workshopping it kind of spiraled to like.
Well, because I remember everybody called you when I came to school, because it was right around the time of Geek Fest. That was the first AIW show I went to. Everybody was calling you
Positive Dan. Yeah.
So it kind of was like a playoff of that, I think, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I totally forgot about that, because it was like, everyone called Positive Dan, because every time I'd be like at the school, I'd be happy because it was my escape. It was like the break from the real life that I had. So it was always like, everyone's like, "Why are you so happy?" I'm like, "I don't know, I'm just positive."
My dream, brother.
Positive Dan.
So, you make all this development, and then I think one of the big things that people forget is, you owe a lot to like Biggins and that weird Hell on Earth scramble you did, where he gave everybody toilet paper to kind of do the old Jimmy Rave thing. So everybody was throwing toilet paper out at you, and it kind of got you over as the heel that you needed to be.
Yeah, it wasn't even quite even toilet paper. It was like there was just like streamers that like stuffed all of a sudden just got thrown at me. It wasn't even to the toilet paper like level yet. It wasn't. Because at the end of the Hell on Earth scramble, like stuff got thrown at me, and then it kind of just spiraled to where the toilet papering is now.
Yeah. So I would be remiss if I don't bring up, at one point there was a very, very, very real hatred for you by one member of the AIW Wrestling Academy. This man, also known as Alex Worldwide Killar.
Yes.
And why did he not like you? Oh, I know why. I'm trying to see if you remember why.
Was it because I just like showed up and I was just killing him in all the drills? Was
Correct.
It? Yes.
Very correct.
And then I remember the one day Danny Spitfire came and even beat Worldwide in a blow up drill, and then Worldwide
that was a rough
got
day. I was
so
there.
pissed, like got up and like threw this big face, like, "Fine, fuck it, I'll do the punishment. I lost anyway," and you started yelling.
Oh yeah, that was a classic day. Worldwide was having a rough one at that. But I remember, like, from what I always remember hearing and talking to Weird Body, he would say that, Killar was upset because you came in and you started smoking him and everything, as well. Then he thought that attention went away from him and went on to someone like you, which is something that people like see,
Yeah.
like they feel like they're getting the short shaft and things like that. Okay, so I'm gonna transition to something else, and this is the time to be real here. From when you came in, for about the first 7-8 months, the entire program you had was leading to you turning Singh heel, Singh seeing the error of his ways, turning back babyface on you, making you the big heel. For reasons, out there, Singh falls out of love with wrestling throughout this time, to the point to where he's not coming to training. He's just not showing up as much. You can just tell the effort's not there in his work, and it kind of bogs you down.
Yeah.
Go through, your kind of mindset throughout this, like what you think is a well put together, storyline that just falls apart.
It was like kind of a bummer because I could see it, and like going through that Team Johnny versus Candice thing, that was kind of supposed like he finally had turned heel, and he was like, we were kind of cooking and it was going, but like I could tell like the motivation really wasn't there with Singh, and then they turned it back babyface literally like the next show on me in February, and it kind of just spiraled down, and we were actually supposed to have, I think, a blow off at the June show that EC3 was on in Menor, and then when they added EC3, it bumped our blow off to
The scramble that
the
I was in,
scramble,
guys.
and then because we had the Back to the Future Cup angle, that was don't watch that match.
We're gonna get into that.
No.
We're gonna get into that. How you got me yelled at by Billy Gunn.
We never ended up having a blow off, and it just faded away. I kind of seem to have a pattern of that with my tag team partners, but it was kind of a thing where it was kind of a bummer, because like I call it, like every independent wrestler, like in the beginning of their first couple years, you fall into scramble purgatory. Mm-hmm. And it's like you have to find a way to get out of that, and like that was like where I saw myself heading, and it was kind of like a gripping like take on reality, because you're just like you're seeing yourself slow down, like your momentum.
And for you, that was definitely a big thing. You brought it up, so I'll bring it up. Our awful, and I mean awful match that we had at Back to the Future Cup, the very first one. You and I, we were pretty geeked for this match. We had a match at UXWA a little bit prior that we thought was pretty solid. And we thought, well, we can do it a little bit bigger here at Back to the Future Cup. Honestly, I think you and I were like two like the few guys who were in that cup that were actually like consistent at practice. We had a match put together.
We were taking outside bookings too.
Yeah,
so
we
it
were
was
taking
like
outside bookings, so we were like excited. We were going, traveling a lot at that time, and we were like, man, this is gonna be a good match. And we had a good match planned. We were there the 2 days before the match and excited about it. And then it happened.
And then the match came, and I forgot literally everything when the match before us has ended. I had a problem remembering everything when we called it for the last time, and I could just tell in your eyes, you're like, this is not going to be good. I hurt my knee.
Yep.
Should have went home right then.
You remember me calling in that
Yep.
match? I kept saying, let me put you in a triangle, roll me up. Let me put you in a triangle, roll me up.
Kept going.
And you just kept going, and you just kept doing stuff.
And then we went to the outside and did the hoverboard spot, and you front flip dived onto me on the hoverboard.
Yep. And I
concussed myself.
And I busted my ass real hard.
And then we did the finish, and then you got yelled at by Billy Gunn.
Yeah, so I got yelled at by Billy Gunn because I gave you a German suplex. And you, in all of your infinite wisdom, decided like, I'm going to try to do a flip boy on this and go crazy. So you land high angle on your shoulder, looks like you hurt yourself. And I remember Candace is kind of, telling us about the match, what we did right, what we did wrong. And Billy Gunn just barges up to me and just starts yelling at me. And
at that point, I was outside. I didn't hear any of it.
Yeah, Billy Gunn's just yelling at me right in front of Candace. And he's like, come on, you're a fucking shooter. You gotta fucking know how to fucking protect these fucking guys. And he's just yelling at me. And I just have to bite my tongue. And I'm just like, yes, sir. Yes, sir. He walks away. And I'm like, God damn it. Now I'll never get signed to AEW because I'm like, oh, there's that unsafe shooter kid. But I will always remember that when it comes to it. So we have all this, you go through an injury right around the time of that June show. You have the knee injury, and then we have that scramble at Menor, and I don't know if you tore your pec, you hurt your pec in some way.
Yeah, we were doing drop kicks at training, and I just kept landing on my shoulder wrong, and then the next thing I know, I'm in a sling for like a month.
Yep, and I remember that, and like you were sad because of course, there went that. And then it just kind of like I remember you were definitely in like a downward spiral in terms of like your mental state because, you got hurt and then the sing feud just doesn't happen the way you had it planned. And, you're kind of in a purgatory, like a super purgatory of like not knowing where you're at as well. Like you see some of the other kids are kind of climbing up the card and it's tough. And then out of nowhere comes the saving grace. Devastation Inc. just can't team anymore because the one's neck is just rubbish. And we have somebody that needs to wrestle Crime Time. And there was literally
We're at
no
Applebee's at Steelyard, and Thorne looks at me and goes, you and Carson are probably getting the call. Because after Johnny's show, after the Johnny scramble, me and Carson did like a bunch of tandem offense because we were the only heels. And that was kind of like the beginning of that.
Yeah, and you get this match against Crime Time, and you get this match against the Headhunters, and this is kind of like your highest profile stuff to date, really.
Yeah.
And you're back, and you think you're cooking.
Yeah, and we were stop and start, and then we had those matches, and then the December show we weren't on, and then we got put with Swoggle right off the rip, and that was in the beginning. It was like, all right, I got these two lackeys, but also like. Once like Swoggle like learned to like not trust me, but he like understood that like I wasn't like a knucklehead, it actually like started cooking with my gimmick, and it started actually like he started to trust me more, not just like, oh, you're this lackey, like just stand over there and take bumps for me. He was actually letting me like expand my character.
So I'm happy you bring up the gimmick. I remember we used to hang out after training all the time. We went to WrestleMania together that year. We traveled together, and I remember me and you having like this big heart to heart. And, I always just remember me telling you like, hey man, you need to be more gimmick. You need to be more gimmick. You need to be more gimmick. And it was almost like you didn't know how to get there, or it wasn't even that. It was kind of, you didn't want to be. You wanted to be a super indie wrestler. You wanted to be a work rate guy, but not understand that the gimmick is going to take you further. And I think you've just finally kind of realized how to kind of transition into more gimmick stuff and less trying to be this drop down 5-star every match wrestler. I mean, like, I know personally when I told you that, you were super hurt because you've got a very bad poker face.
Yeah.
And I saw the life leave your body when I told you this that night. What's the adjustments kind of trying to figure yourself out and figure out how to be this character and care a little less about work rate and worry more about being this character?
Well, there was like a lot of this happened at the same time of like Johnny left, so we really didn't have a wrestler, quote unquote, who was like trying, like kind of guiding us. It was kind of like the Wild West in terms of like, if you guys have already debuted, the stuff that like Thorne and Biggins can give us is like only like at that point, like so far, and then everything else kind of like learn it on your own, which like everyone's like, oh, you learn the basics in wrestling training, you learn the rest on the road. And like that was true just because like once like Johnny Candice left, kind of that safety net was gone, where you couldn't be like, oh, hey, you're currently active doing this, like what should I be doing? Or so it was a lot of I call it like Super Indie Dr. Dan was around for a while, and it did not work at all. It was rough, especially like mentally too, like trying to travel places, and like I really wasn't like memorable. I was just like another dude. But then like reinvesting in my character and like really trying to figure out like who Dr. Dan is, and I did it like, and this is more like almost recent, like we're almost skipping a handful of months, but like doing that stuff with Swoggle and like really just me managing and then building on the momentum of like other places I'm managing, or I'm doing like short matches where I have to think of stuff that like separates me from other people. The gimmicky stuff kind of started coming through, and like I read like Mike Quackenbush's book, and like I listened to podcasts about like people doing like movie roles and trying to get in the headspace of characters. And like I went, like Thorne told me to watch, like in the beginning, like it was like trying to be like more of an American Psycho type character. I went back, like I hate horror movies, like I have never actually watched like one in full, but actually I went and watched that movie and like trying to like get in the mindset of like what a character, like, so like me as Dan in real life is different than Dr. Dan.
Yeah.
And it's like, what would Dr. Dan do in these situations? And just trying to put myself in like a character headspace now. And especially like more recently, like that's like what I've been trying to do, is like some of that just doesn't make sense.
Okay. My big question for you is, obviously you and I, very tumultuous relationship as friends. I'm a very mean human being to you sometimes. Pull no punch on that. When is the time you have felt most threatened by me or most scared of me?
I know for sure you were the most mad at me at that Girls Night Out show. That was
yeah.
That was the time you were the most angry at me, and you straight up yelled at me to soberness.
Oh, I remember that. I do remember that one.
Yeah, that's the only time I can
8x10s that night.
I can remember in the back, like that is the only time that actually is in my brain that you literally yelled at me. You're like, if you don't remember what Jimmy Jacobs tells you right now, I will literally hate you forever. And I just went totally white face and I sobered up.
Hey Dan, why were you so drunk that night? Come on. I don't think your current girlfriend's gonna pay the $5 a month to get on the Patreon. Let's hear it. Come on, just say it. This is before she met you anyways.
Yeah, I had a relationship with a lady, and we're going to get real deep in AIW cuts. Her friend worked out a Planet Fitness with TJ Dynamite. And TJ Dynamite was trying to like sly on this girl. So he took her on a date to AIW with the girl I was currently involved with her. But this was at the time I was currently ghosting her because there was a pregnancy scare.
Bombshell. This is why you pay the $5 a month for Patreon, folks.
So there was Tito's at the show and beer, and I proceeded to get as hammered as possible.
I think that girl was coming to get your DNA.
No.
She already had it.
Yeah,
she already
had DNA. You weren't sure.
That, and then the whole time, Biggins goes, Dan, make yourself useful. Sell these posters. So he gave me these posters, and I went and sold them all. And the whole time, I just kept going over by them, like, TJ Dynamite, want to buy a poster? And just kept ignoring the girl the whole time. Oh, and then I don't have a child, so it's all good.
So it's all good. Man, I do not know how I can really top that. You got to end on that, folks. Let's be real. It's been a great time. Dr. Dan, as always, you guys see him at every AIW show. Thank you so much, Dr. Dan, for joining me this week on School Sucks. And thank God you're not a father.
Thank God. Hopefully that $5 is worth it, guys.